Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're taking a close look at Njangī.
Yeah, it's this traditional financial system.
Yeah.
And it's really gaining traction here in the DMV.
Yeah. And we've actually got a ton of research on this, some academic papers, background from, Wikipedia.
Right.
Even some data about how DC's demographics are changing. It's going to be a fascinating deep dive.
It really is. I mean, what's so interesting about this is how Njangī brings together these like really old traditions with how, the financial world works today.
Yeah.
So we're going to really unpack, how it all works, how it's gotten so popular, and of course, what challenges it's up against, especially with legal stuff.
Definitely. Okay, so let's just start with the basics. What exactly is Njangī? I mean, the name, it sounds like kind of mysterious.
Yeah, it does have a kind of like secret society vibe.
Right.
But it's not really a secret society. It's more about like really strong community trust. Imagine a group of people, right? And they're all putting money in regularly. And then each person, they get a turn to receive the whole pot. It's actually officially called a Rotating Savings and Credit Association, or RICA, if you want to like sound super official.
So it's kind of like a super intense savings club.
Exactly.
But is it legal? I mean, it sounds pretty informal.
Yeah, that's a good question. So in Njangī, it's really got these deep roots, in communal traditions, especially in West and Central Africa, where like regular banking systems, they weren't always there. Like people didn't trust them. It's all about those tight community ties, everyone supporting each other. And to answer your question, yeah, totally legal here in the U.S., though it kind of operates in this like undefined legal zone.
Okay, interesting. So it basically crossed the Atlantic with immigrants, and it's found a new home, like here in the DMV.
Exactly.
But why is it like catching on so much here specifically?
Well, the DMV, it's got this like huge African diaspora, right?
Right.
And for a lot of folks who are new here, building up a formal credit history, that can be a huge, huge hurdle. Njangī, it's a familiar, trusted option.
Yeah, totally. Because you've got that trust already there, within the community.
Exactly. It's already there.
Okay. But can we like back up for a sec? When we say DMV, are we just talking about DC, or is there more to it?
Ah, good point.
Yeah.
You're right. The Washington metropolitan area, which is what we call the DMV, it's way bigger than just DC. It's like parts of Maryland, Virginia, even a little bit of West Virginia gets in there.
Wow.
It's much bigger than most people think.
Way bigger. Okay, so it's big. And I mean, it's like a pretty well-off area, right? High incomes, tons of educated people.
Oh, absolutely. Like
Everywhere.
the highest income metro areas in the U.S. consistently. I mean, it even beats San Francisco. Median household income is over $100,000. That's way above the national average. And it's got it all going on. Tech, defense contracting, tourism, and, it's even getting big in biotechnology.
So you've got this like traditional system thriving in an area that's already like financially doing pretty well. Why?
That's a great question. One of the key things here is like Njangī, it really promotes financial inclusion. You don't need a bank account. You don't need a credit history. It's all about the trust built right there in the community.
I can see how that would be like such a relief for some people. Maybe they can't access those traditional banking services.
Right, exactly.
Plus, you've got that motivation to save because you're going to get that whole pot eventually.
Or for sure. The fact that you're contributing regularly and your turn's coming up, that keeps people disciplined for sure. And you can't forget that community support element, right? Everyone succeeds together. It creates this like shared responsibility.
That's a really powerful part of it. But I got to ask, are there any downsides? Like what if someone in the group, doesn't pay their share?
Yeah, that's a major risk.
Yeah.
Like defaulting.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't contribute, especially if they've already gotten their payout, that can really mess things up for everyone.
And because it's all like these informal agreements, there's not a lot of legal recourse, right? You can't just like sue somebody.
You got it.
Yeah.
No, you can't. And that's a real concern. Without those contracts, those regulations, it's tough to settle disputes.
Yeah. So legally speaking, Njangī's in a kind of tricky spot.
Yeah, it's definitely operating in a gray area. You could say it's not illegal, but it's like totally unregulated. So people, they don't have those same protections against fraud, or if things are mismanaged, like you would with a bank.
Makes sense. I bet that makes some financial institutions pretty nervous,
Oh, for sure.
especially with how popular it's getting. So are banks and regulators like just ignoring all this?
Mostly, yeah. But there are these little signs of change, which is interesting. Like some community groups, some credit unions, they're actually exploring ways to make Njangī part of the official system,
Right.
to make it more secure, more legit.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's like bridging the gap between tradition and the modern world.
Exactly. It is a bridge.
Okay, but here's another question. Is Njangī only for African communities? I mean, the DMV is super diverse.
Right. And this is where it gets really fascinating. You see, these rotating saving systems, they're not just an African thing. They're everywhere, global. You've got Tandas in Latin America, Susus in the Caribbean. It's crazy how people all over with the same needs come up with similar solutions.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So could Njangī become even bigger then? I mean, people are always looking for new ways to save, to build community.
Oh, absolutely. There's potential for sure. I mean, even here in the DMV, there are folks who aren't African who are joining these groups. It's that community approach that draws them in.
Yeah, this old tradition suddenly fits into this modern need.
Totally. Okay.
But we can't ignore, the big thing happening in D.C. right now. The demographics are changing like crazy. How does that tie into all of this?
It's all connected. D.C.'s black population, which used to be the majority, it's shrinking. And at the same time, millennials are, flooding in, driving up the cost of housing in a lot of areas.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Njangī can help those folks who are getting priced out of the traditional ways of buying a house.
Exactly. It's an alternative way to get to that home ownership dream, especially for people who, might not get those regular loans. Njangī, it kind of reflects how D.C. is changing, a solution for a diverse population facing all these new economic challenges.
Wow. It's this tiny little world, this microcosm
It is.
of all these big social and economic forces all playing out in one place.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. In Njangī, it's woven into all these big changes happening in the DMV.
It really is. Yeah. And, as we dig deeper into Njangī's role in all this, we got to talk about the millennials. They're coming to D.C. in huge numbers, but a lot of them have tons of student debt, and the job market's tough.
Right.
So that adds a whole other layer to this housing situation.
Because now they're competing for homes with people who've been here longer, maybe have better incomes.
You got it. And that pushes prices up, making it even harder to buy a house the traditional way, for some folks. And that's where Njangī gets really interesting, because it offers this totally different approach.
So instead of dealing with banks and mortgages, which can be scary, Njangī lets you kind of sidestep all that.
Yeah. It's like a whole other system running parallel. It's about using the power of the community to reach those financial goals.
Right.
It's a real game changer for people who feel like those traditional ways are just closed off to them.
That's got to be empowering, taking control, but with the community support. But it makes me wonder, wouldn't the system be even bigger in places where banks are totally out of reach? Why is it doing so well in the DMV where, things are good financially?
That's a smart question.
Yeah.
And the answer, it kind of tells us something bigger about Njangī. It's not JGST about filling a gap where banks aren't around.
Okay.
It's about building a community, right? Sharing responsibility. And those values, they matter even in places where banks are doing just fine.
So even when there are banks, people still want that connection, that feeling that we're all in this together.
Absolutely. Traditional banking, it could feel so cold, so transactional.
Yeah.
And Njangī is the opposite.
Yeah.
It's about trust, shared goals.
Yeah.
And this sense that we're all moving forward together.
That's the financial version of a community garden or something.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone chips in, everyone benefits, and there's that pride in what you're building together.
That's such a cool way to think about it. So in Njangī, it's about way more than just the money.
Right, exactly.
It's about that social stuff too, the connections, the support network, which reminds me, we talked about the risk of people not paying, defaulting.
Right.
How often does that actually happen in these groups?
It's hard to say for sure, because Njangī, it's not tracked officially like regular banking, but the people in these groups, they know it's a risk. And they do things to protect themselves.
So it's not just blind trust. What do they do to make it safer?
Well, in Njangī, it runs on social pressure and reputation, big time.
Oh, okay.
If you don't keep your promise, word gets around. And that can really hurt you socially, A&D, financially, in the community.
So the community itself kind of keeps everyone accountable.
You got it. Plus, you got to remember, these groups, they're often made up of people who've known each other forever, years, generations even. So there's this deep understanding there,
Right?
a shared history.
It shows that sometimes those, like, unspoken rules, they're stronger than any contract, huh?
Totally. They can be. Absolutely.
But what about, like, managing the money? We talked about that, too. How do they make sure it's done right when it's all, so informal?
That's where things get tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without official records and, like, someone checking everything, there's always the risk of, like, mismanagement. Whether someone means to do it or not, it can happen.
So picking the right person to handle the money, that's super important.
I mean, trust, that's the whole foundation of the Njangī.
Right.
And a lot of these groups, they've got their own ways of doing things. Like, they'll have a treasurer who keeps track of everything.
Like old school with a ledger. It's cool, but it seems like mistakes could happen easily.
They're right, they could. And that's why there's all this talk now about connecting Njangī with, like, regular banks to add those safety measures,
Okay.
make things more transparent, but without losing, like, the heart of Njangī.
Yeah, so finding that balance, keeping the good stuff, but adding some of that security.
Exactly. Imagine, like, a hybrid system. Njangī groups could use secure banking platforms, maybe even get access to those low-interest loans, but they'd still be in control, making their own decisions.
That's a really cool idea, but wouldn't that mean more, like, scrutiny from the government, like taxes and stuff?
That's a good point. Yeah, if Njangī gets more, like, visible, more connected to the official world, it'll probably catch the eye of the tax people and those regulatory folks.
So keeping Njangī, like, authentic but also safe from all that, that's going to be tough.
It is. Making sure Njangī can keep going strong, even as the financial world changes. That's the challenge.
It's amazing, though, this thing, so rooted in tradition, and it's part of these huge conversations about how to make finance better, more inclusive. But are there any other, like, criticisms of Njangī? Anything we haven't talked about yet that could be a problem?
Yeah, some folks say that this reliance on, like, social pressure, it can be a bit exclusive. Like, if you don't have those strong ties in the community already, you might not be welcome.
So it's trying to help people financially, but it could accidentally leave some people out.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yes.
And it's something these Njangī groups, they need to think about as they grow.
Right.
How to include more people without losing that trust and community feel.
Yeah.
That's going to be super important for Njangī to really succeed in the long run.
It reminds us that even when we're trying to do good, there can be these unexpected downsides. We got to keep learning and adapting.
I agree.
Make sure the system is really doing what it's supposed to.
And, bringing in more different kinds of people, that actually makes communities stronger. New ideas, new perspectives. It helps them face challenges better.
This has been so insightful. We've, like, gone through the history, how it all works, the good stuff, the tough stuff, and even how Njangī could change the future of finance. It's clear that this system, even though it's so old, it's, like, totally relevant right now.
Totally. It speaks to what people are going through today.
It is. And looking ahead, it's super interesting to think about how Njangī might change and what it could mean for creating a financial system that works for everyone.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time.
That's the perfect way to lead into our last section. We'll look at what's next for Njangī, some of the new things happening, and what impact it could have on, like, the whole financial world. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Njangī, where it came from, how it's working here in the DMV, all those social and economic pieces.
Right.
But now let's look ahead. What's coming next for Njangī? What trends are we seeing? And how could it, impact the whole world of finance?
Well, it's a really exciting time for Njangī, I guess.
Yeah.
We're seeing this, like, really cool mix of tradition meeting, like, cutting-edge stuff. One of the big things is people are using technology more and more to make Njangī work better.
Hold on, technology. We've been talking about this, like, super old school community thing, and now we're bringing in computers and stuff.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Right. But think about those, like, problems we talked about before, like keeping good records, making sure everything's transparent. Technology can really help with that. There are all these fintech startups popping up, and they're focused on, like, the Njangī community specifically.
Yeah.
They're building platforms that, like, streamline the whole process.
So we're talking, like, apps, websites. For something that's always been about people meeting face-to-face, what's the advantage of going digital like that?
Well, these platforms, they've got all these features to make Njangī easier to use, more efficient.
Okay.
They help you manage contributions, track payments, even just communicate better within the group.
So it's like addressing those worries we talked about, about mismanagement or not being clear about where the money's going.
Exactly. When you digitize parts of Njangī, it adds that layer of, like, accountability, better records. That builds trust, makes it more secure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Plus, it makes it easier for like younger people to get involved. They're used to doing everything online, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it's modernizing the tools, but keeping that heart of Njangī, that community and trust, intact.
You got it. And these platforms, they can even help with like financial education.
Oh, wow.
A lot of them have resources, advice, to help people make smart money decisions, which could be huge, especially for folks who maybe never had access to like regular financial literacy programs.
So Njangī isn't just about saving or getting a loan anymore. It's about becoming more financially savvy overall.
Exactly. You learn as you go. It's really amazing how Njangī is like changing and growing to fit what people need today.
It really is. And all this mixing of tradition and new technology, it makes me wonder, could Njangī be like a model for creating new financial products, to help communities that are kind of left out of the regular system?
That's a great question. And we're actually already seeing some like mainstream financial institutions taking inspiration from Njangī, like those community-based ideas.
Okay.
Some credit unions, they're trying out these things called lending circles.
Yeah.
Based on that rotating savings model.
Interesting.
So borrowers can get loans with lower interest rates, and they get that support and accountability from the group.
So the heart of Njangī, that trust, the community, sharing responsibility, it's starting to influence how we think about making finance work for everyone.
It is. It's like those ripples spreading out from this tradition, into the modern world of finance.
Wow, it's really powerful. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from Njangī's history to how it's working today, the good stuff, the challenges, and even how it might shape the future of finance.
It's really a testament to like the power of people coming together and the creative ways we're finding to reach our financial goals,
You've been listening to The Deep Dive. And we hope that exploring Njangī with us has given you some new things to think about. And remember, the more we share what we learn, the more powerful it becomes.
For sure.
So talk to your friends, your family, your coworkers about this. Maybe you'll even want to look into like alternative financial systems in your own community. Who knows? Maybe you'll even start your own Njangī group.
It could happen.
Thanks for joining us.